Coming this fall from SJS Direct in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. You can pre-order your copy of The Man Crisis today on Amazon.com. When I take a critical look at this mass shooting in Jacksonville, Florida, where David Katz took out a pistol and murdered two men as a result of losing the Madden 2019 tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, I see my point proven about these beta males having no self-control. Now, many politicians and pundits will sit there and argue for days about gun control, but recently your Governor Rick Scott recently signed a law stating that the age to purchase a gun had been raised from 18 to 21, and there was more legislation to deal with background checks. But that had no impact on your David Katz, who decided to bring a weapon into this Madden 2019 tournament. And after losing this tournament, that's when your David Katz decided to take out that weapon and try to make people lose their lives because he lost that video game. Because we see with this incident that it's not about gun control, it's about men learning how to have self-control. And when it comes down to the beta male just does not have any self-control, because it's his inability to have self-control, and that's the reason why he acts so impulsively the way your David Katz did after he was eliminated from this Madden 2019 tournament. Because this man was in his emotions about losing this video game, he decided to take out that weapon, which he took across state lines all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, all the way down to Florida, and he took that weapon out of his pocket or his pants, and he decided to take that weapon and use it to shoot his fellow competitors. When you look at his behavior, it shows us how this is not a gun control issue. This man had a weapon which he took across state lines, and it shows us that no legislation is going to deal with this from a gun control perspective, because the problem with most of these beta males has to do with the way these beta males are raised. Because when it comes down to the beta male oftentimes he has female social traits, female social characteristics, and because he has female social traits and female characteristics, he does not know how to conduct himself in the way a man does. And that's all due to the fact that he has not been prepared for life by men, or has been prepared for life by his father. And because his father and the men in his life have not taught him male life skills and male survival skills, this is why your beta males, like your David Katz, short circuit and malfunction in situations where life just doesn't go their way. And when I take a look at David Katz, he is a textbook example of what I talk about in the Man Crisis as related to the short-circuiting beta male rage, and the spectrum of beta male violence. Because your David Katz showed how he was one of these short-circuiting beta males, because after losing this tournament, he short-circuited, malfunctioned, and exploded. And after that, he then exploded into this beta male rage, and then participated in one of the extremes of the spectrum of violent behaviors by then taking out that weapon and then pointing that laser sight directly at one of these players, because they showed this in the video. They show the red light going on the black man's chest as he's playing this game and talking to his friends. He's looking at this light and is shocked, but this is par for the course as it relates to these beta males. And we need to stop talking about this from a gun control perspective, because these mass shootings have nothing to do with gun control. The problem with these guns is that these beta males have no self-control, and because they have no self-control and cannot navigate through their emotions when something goes bad in their life, they then go out here and participate in this spectrum of violent behaviors. And as they participate in the spectrum of violent behaviors, sadly, people winding up losing their lives because guys like your David Katz can't lose a video game. And because they can't lose a video game, other people have to suffer. And the reason why people sadly are suffering is because most people in America do not want to confront American women about the way they are raising boys and the culture we are raising boys. Because for all of this talk about toxic masculinity, the actual toxic males are these beta males out here. These beta male nice guys that feminists socially engineered to be kinder, softer, and gentler. Most of these males are filled with anger. Most of these males are filled with frustration. Most of these males are filled with rage. And the reason why they are filled with rage is because they do not have the proper coping skills. They do not know how to, again, navigate through their emotions. And they do not know how to think critically. And because they don't have these critical and essential skills to manhood, they wind up responding to situations in the exact same way a female would respond. Because when I take a look at your David Katz's behavior, it's the same type of impulsive behavior I saw all growing up through my childhood in the 1980s and the 1990s here in New York City, where in many cases one of these black guys, when they would get upset, they would go get their gun and shoot people, all because they lost a video game, or they lost, or a girl told them no, or somebody wound up making fun of them, or somebody said something to them. And because they could not deal with the humiliation or the embarrassment, they would go out here and act impulsively by going to get this gun and then using this gun to commit murder, to murder the person who hurt their feelings. Because these guys are emotional. Everything is about their emotions. And one of the articles I read, they talked about how these males would get emotional over these video games. And again, I would see this behavior when I was a boy, when I would go to the pizza parlor and guys would be playing video games, or I would go to an arcade like Playland that used to be here in Times Square, and a guy was winning. Guys would get emotional over it. But again, men who have discipline, yes, they would feel the excitement about that game, but it would never really get that personal. It only gets personal when it comes down to these beta males, because again, these beta males have addictive personalities. And because they have addictive personalities, they don't know where the boundaries are. And I remember when I was going to a pizza shop in Washington Avenue back in 1988, I ran into a similar personality to this. And this guy was winning this video game, and he was so caught up in his emotions that he decided to beg me for a quarter for a video game. Now, I said I didn't have it, and I was ordering a pizza, and this guy just kept begging, bugging me, pestering me, and harassing me, not understanding that he had crossed the boundaries for a situation. Because when somebody tells you no, and you begging them for a quarter, that shows, again, that there's something wrong with you, because you're sitting here making this video game more valuable than your dignity, your self-respect, your self-worth, and your intangibles of manhood. And that's what I ran into when I was 14 years old in 1988. And that's the same type of dysfunctional behavior that your David Katz participated in. He didn't know where the boundaries were, and because he didn't know where the boundaries were, and when he lost that game, he decided to make people lose their lives. Now, I almost got into a fight with this guy back in 1988 because he didn't know where the boundaries were, as related to a video game, because when you're begging another boy for quarters for a video game that you don't even know, or you go out here and you're begging grown men, which is what I saw back in the 80s, for quarters for a video game, again, it shows what happens when boys are not raised properly. Because a boy who has been raised properly knows that once he spends his quarter for a video game and he loses, guess what? He then walks out of that pizza parlor or that arcade, and then he just goes on with his day. He just knows that that's just one part of his day, but he's not going to get so obsessed with a video game that when he loses a video game, he's going to do things to compromise his intangibles of manhood, like his dignity, like his self-respect, like his self-worth, his safety, or his health, or the health of others. It's just, at the end of the day, it's just another video game, and that's the sad thing about this whole situation. And while many people will debate gun control, what they don't understand is that your David Katz never learned self-control. They said this was a guy who stayed to himself, but again, when I look at him, I see another one of these beta males who is in crisis, something I talk about in depth in my new nonfiction book that's coming out this October, The Man Crisis, because when I take a look at these incidents and I take a look at the behavior that these men participate in, it's clear to me that this is not a gun control issue. This is a self-control issue, and this has to do with the way we are raising men here in America over the last 50 years. Because the big problem with these beta males is that, again, they have no discipline, no self-control, no self-worth, and no intangibles as related to manhood, because they were never taught male life skills, they were never taught male coping skills, and they didn't understand that the world works differently for men than it does for women. And we see these guys with these female life skills, and they go out into the world, and they have situations happen to them, and these guys fall completely apart. And this beta male fell completely apart, and went with him murdering those two men over that video game being eliminated. He proved my point about this not being a gun control issue, because he took this weapon all the way from Baltimore, and took it down to Florida. And this was in spite of all of these so-called strict gun control laws. So this shows me that this was about this beta male and his issues. And in America, we really need to confront these issues as related to these beta males, because if we don't do anything about these beta males, we are going to have more mass shootings, because these mass shootings are just a symptom of the man crisis we have going on here in America, a man crisis that will get worse before it gets better, because we have over 2 to 3 generations of these beta males out here, and these men are littered across this country like landmines. And what's really scary about these beta males is that we don't know what will set them off, when they will get set off, or what type of violence will happen when they get set off, or the damage to the community that they live in once they are set off. That is the most terrifying thing about having to deal with all of these beta males that have been socially engineered by feminists over the last 50 years, is that we don't know what these men are going to do, or what kinds of violence they are capable of. And we are seeing a spectrum of their violent behaviors, from this David Katz going out here and shooting up this tournament, to the men who took planes off an airfield, one trying to kill his wife and his children with a plane, and another one who just decided to take a plane and crash it into an island. The spectrum of violence and dangerous and behaviors these guys participate in is terrifying. And until Americans start to acknowledge that we have a man crisis here in America, nothing is really going to change, because we're reporting on these incidents as isolated incidents when all of these incidents tie together. And when you understand how they tie together, you will see where the problem really lies. And the problem lies with the way we have been raising boys to become men, and the gynocentric way we have raised boys to become men has bred these beta males, and these beta males just are not prepared and equipped to navigate the world as related to adult men. And because they're not prepared and equipped to navigate the world as men, this is why these men are short-circuiting, malfunctioning, falling apart, and then exploding and participating in these horrific acts of violence like we saw in Jacksonville at the Madden 2019 tournament. When it comes down to these incidents, the only way things are going to get better, again, is if we start acknowledging this man crisis we have going on here in America. I only saw one report on it on Fox News, and sadly, we need more people to start talking about this man crisis in America so we can finally start doing something to try to prevent these mass shootings from happening and these other violent behaviors from happening in the future. If you want to learn more about the man crisis, you can pre-order my Kindle version of the man crisis by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box, or you can wait for the paperback to come out this October for the man crisis. In this book, I go in depth explaining these beta males and their behaviors, the history of what led to the creation of these beta males, their spectrum of violent behaviors, and the ultimate solution to what we can do to solve this man crisis here in America. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.